Today there are those who would tell us that the Ten Commandments are just for the Jews. That's because most Christians do not realize who they really are. The Old Testament book of Hosea tells us that one day people who were not considered to be the people of God would be called His children, sons of the living God. The instructions and blessings intended for Israel, as specified in the Old Testament, were not just for the Jews. Based on the fact that most Jewish people rejected Yeshua, Jesus Christ, as Messiah, some would persuade us that the church has replaced the Jews as God's chosen people. That idea is most commonly referred to as replacement theology, a confusing ideology that separates believers from Israel. It is a theology that creates two distinct groups of people, the children of Israel to whom the law was given, and the church to whom grace was given. Well, a careful examination of Scripture reveals that there was both law and grace in the Old Testament, and there's law and grace in the New Testament as well. In fact, if there was no law in the New Testament, there would not be any need for grace. To further complicate things, another even more confusing premise advanced by some theologians is that Jewish people and the church as separate entities have separate plans of salvation. I call this exclusion theology, the idea that somehow Jewish people do not need Jesus, that somehow they are excluded from the plan of salvation established by their own Messiah. The first believers, the first church members, if you will, were Jews. It was only later that the Gentiles or nations were incorporated into the assembly of believers, and even after that time, the book of Acts informs us that thousands of Jewish people became believers and that they were all zealous of the law. They believed in Jesus and never once had the idea that their belief would in any way oppose the commandments of God. The truth is there is only one Israel, and that title is not exclusive to the Jews or to the church. As we read in the New Testament, Gentile believers join with the believing remnant of Israel to become part of Israel, the very same Israel that we read about in the Old Testament. As the book of Galatians states, the Israel of God. Were the Ten Commandments just for the Jews? No, those Ten Commandments were just for Israel. Earnestly contending for the faith once delivered to the saints, I'm Richard Rives with Just the Facts.